I'd say the biggest takeaway for me from this 5-MeO experience was coming to the realization that I have all of the tools at my disposal to address and tackle any problem that is currently in my life and that will ever come into my life, and that I have the inherent power to be able to address these problems. What was my life like before any meaningful psychedelic experiences? I was lucky to grow up in a pretty secure and safe neighborhood, family, and environment. And so I think in a lot of ways, I've been really lucky growing up in beautiful British Columbia. I spent a lot of early years in England, but a lot of the years I remember have been here in BC. And yeah, I went to a nice school, lived in a nice neighborhood. Honestly, like had a lot of, I think, luxuries growing up, which was, really, yeah, beautiful in lots of ways. I got to spend a lot of time playing sports, got a lot of time to spend educating myself. I, as a kid, I played a lot of video games, played a lot of ultimate frisbee. I was a big runner, did lots of track, and going into my years at university and kind of coming out of high school, I started dabbling in cannabis, and I'd say that was kind of like my first introduction to maybe altered states. And I don't know if some people might say that cannabis is a psychedelic. I personally maybe would say it is as well. But for me, that was kind of like some of my earlier lighter introductions to expanded states were through cannabis and also through meditation. So I was very curious about the mind. I've always been someone that's kind of questioned reality to some extent. Yeah, how was I exposed to the idea that psychedelics could be used in a meaningful way? I believe I was in high school when I first found out that psychedelics were being used in research. And so I think, I can't remember the exact study, but I think it might have been something out of John Hopkins, or maybe it was something that MAPS was doing. I think I just learned about the different organizations that were at play, that were doing some of the work to help move psychedelics forward. I think going into this experience, the main one for me was just curiosity. And that kind of ties back to how I approach psychedelics in the first place. And I think that's, for me, it's always been a really nice and kind of foundational way to approach any sort of psychedelic experience. But I remember in particular with this particular 5-MeO experience, it was really just genuine curiosity. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to get out of it, but then in both the preparation session leading up to the experience and also directly before some of the preparation ceremony that took place right before the experience, what I actually remember wanting, coming down to, and the idea that I wanted to get out of this experience, the feeling that I wanted to get out actually came down to power. I wanted to tap into more of my power as a sovereign human being. And so that was a big intention going into this experience. The experience that I'm going to talk about today is a powerful 5-MeO session that I had to celebrate my 25th birthday. So a good friend of mine had reached out to me and offered this medicine to me to work with. It was something that I hadn't worked before, so I was super curious. And seeing that my birthday was coming up, I actually asked this practitioner and friend if I could invite 3 of my close friends to also join me in this experience. So I was really excited because not only was it something that I was getting to try for the first time, but I also got to invite 3 of my best friends to come experience this with me. And we did it at the comfort of my own home. We cleared a lot of space to make way for ceremony. Ceremony is something that I've been pretty familiar with, so I kind of knew how I wanted to set the space, the type of atmosphere that I wanted to create. And so we created a really nice, inviting atmosphere. And yeah, the 4 of us all met with 2 practitioners actually the day of, the main practitioner as well as someone that was co-sitting or co-guiding with her. And both of them created a really beautiful space for us to explore. And so with that, we went into the experience, and as I've been told and as I'm aware now, like I think as a lot of 5-MeO practitioners will do, they'll offer this experience in a sequence. So you'll be able to have 3 doses sequentially. And so the first dose is called the handshake. And this dose is just a smaller threshold of a dose, only about 2 to 3 milligrams. And this would be the first dose that we all took together, me and my 3 friends, in like a domino fashion. We all took this first dose, and it only lasted for about 5 minutes. And so we all got to experience that and come out of it. And for me, that first aspect of the dose was pretty intense. Surprisingly, there were some visuals, even though I was told like 5-MeO doesn't really have a visual quality, unlike its brother chemical NN-DMT. So I was surprised to have a little bit of visuals on that first dose. It was really intense, maybe more intense than I was expecting, especially for such a small amount of substance. And then we moved into the second dose, which was called the hug dose. And so this is about 5 to 6 milligrams of 5-MeO. And we we all did the same thing again. We kind of did it in a domino fashion where each of us would take it one by one. And this dose was more challenging. And we were kind of told this going into it as well. This middle dose, for some people, can be challenging because you kind of have 2 feet in two places. You have one foot grounded in this reality, and then you have one foot that's kind of reaching out and wanting to step into this new realm or this new state that the 5-MeO is kind of beckoning you towards, this non-dual state. And so I found that to be true for myself. Definitely during my experience, it was a little bit more challenging. There was some more resistance. I noticed myself kind of coming up against my ego a little bit and noticing my ego trying to control the situation. And so I just tried to surrender as best I could to that and allowed that to pass. And again, this experience was pretty short. So that second dose only lasted about 10 minutes. And then from there, we each one by one did the full release dose, which is one name for it. I think some people also call it the full embrace. And there's probably a bunch of other names for it too, but that's what I was told. And this is the full therapeutic dose of 5-MeO DMT. So about 10 to 12 milligrams. Don't remember exactly what I took, but somewhere in that threshold. And I remember being completely blasted off into a beautiful kind of ethereal suspended state. I remember once I was able to kind of regain some consciousness, which maybe would have been after like a few minutes, because I think a large part of the initial period of that dose is fairly unconscious. But once I was kind of coming back into myself, I noticed like all these intense sensations, like some of the most intense sensations that I've ever felt in my life, all happening at the same time. I just kind of basically started to feel the weight of all the different responsibilities that I had. At this time, I was kind of going through a challenge with work. There was lots of things happening, lots of transition, and I just felt all of that like immensely. Like I felt all of the different responsibilities and tasks and projects and things that I carry with my work. And so it felt heavy, and I think I even maybe even started to cry a little bit. And the beautiful thing with this experience was that that was then simultaneously coupled with this immense feeling of competence and power. And that's where that intention came in. That's where the adjective of power really started to come through. And so that was really a beautiful feeling. It was kind of paradoxical to have like this simultaneous like weight and I guess lightness and emotional release around work, but then also to have this like feeling of just being extremely competent and yeah, powerful, not only just in work, but just as like a human being. I really was tapping into the state of just feeling really connected. And I felt really connected not only to myself, but to everyone else who was in the room. I felt super grateful that they were there. So much gratitude started to come out. And that was really like the kind of theme that started to trail out towards the end of my experience was just tears of gratitude for being able to experience something like this. You know, this happens to me a lot when I do psychedelics. It's a common theme for me where I start to just yeah, cry, even often tears of gratitude because I'm like, wow, I wish more people could have access to this. So, how would I describe my biggest takeaway and how has it impacted my life since? I'd say the biggest takeaway for me from this 5-MeO experience was coming to the realization that I have all of the tools at my disposal to address and tackle any problem that is currently in my life and that will ever come into my life. And that I have the inherent power to be able to address these problems. For that particular 5-MeO experience, at the time, integration for me really came down to connecting with family and honestly telling my story. I've been finding that that's always been a really useful avenue for me, and I've been lucky to be surrounded by people in my life that I can open up to about my psychedelic experiences. So, you know, I told my sister about this experience. I told my mom about this experience. I told my dad about this experience. Just that act of sharing really helped me integrate because it allowed me to kind of mirror off of other people. I could kind of use their reaction to understand a little bit more about myself as well. And then on top of that, journaling. So journaling for me has always been a tremendously valuable tool. Directly after the experience, journaling was huge for me. And then subsequently, over the coming months or the months after the experience, journaling was really helpful. What is one tool or resource that I would recommend to someone who's at the start of their psychedelic journey? I think one of the biggest tools I'd recommend is a mentor of sorts, someone that has experienced psychedelics before it, and ideally someone that's really gone to um, considerable depth with their psychedelic experience. I think it would be really wise to reach out to someone who's been there before you necessarily embark on a journey yourself. And whether you end up working with a guide or someone that you trust to guide your experience, at least just talking to someone about that first, especially if it's your first time having a psychedelic experience. Don't just use the internet to be your only source of information. Like actually reach out and find the people in your community that are there that have already done that before, because not only will that be helpful for you going into the experience, but then you've already made a connection for yourself when you come out of the experience. You've already made a connection that could potentially serve you both as you prepare and also as you integrate.